Hey family, this is Brother Prodigy, and I'm back once again, and the title of this entry is The Structure of the Matrix. And this entry is probably one of the most important entries that I'm going to do because it can give you a comprehensive background of our world and how it functions. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about are the fact that if the Circle 7 Quran says that there was never a time when man was not, why can we only find evidence for civilization and culture dating back tens of thousands of years? Also, what I'm going to be really talking about is why is the information in relation to consciousness so fractured? Why does it seem like it's so fractured? Also, why is the origin of the caucasoid so mysterious, and where do they originate from? Where do they come from? What is his role in relation to consciousness? What were dinosaurs? Why were they created? Why did they die? Why do we see mass speciation and mass extinction among macroscopic life? Who are the Archons? Who are the architects of this world we live in? Why does it feel like every time we as a people make progress, or make some semblance of progress, why do we feel like we always are getting knocked back? Okay, and I'm basically going to talk about, pretty much all these topics in detail. So really, let's get started, okay? Let's define our terms, all right? Let's define matrix. I'm using the word matrix as defined as a virtual reality data space in which things are embedded and or encoded. All right. Now, the definition of Archon is simply, it's a Greek word that means ruler or lord, frequently used as the title of a specific public office. Okay. That's where I'm pulling the word Archon from. Okay. Now, let's go over some fundamental precepts. Now, the matrix was created in order to control. Control who? Who are the ones being controlled? When you look at the populace, the masses of society, they are incapable of critical thinking and logical reasoning from a foundation based upon spiritual truth. So, therefore, the populace is actually mentally ill. And there are only two sides to this system. And either you're a part of the solution or you are a part of the problem. Goodness and evil come from within. You have the animal nature as being of the flesh, and you have the divine nature as being born again, quote unquote. Okay? The animal nature, which includes the ego, is fashioned according to the image and likeness of God, little g, aka the demiurge. Now, question. Why are we unable to find historical evidence for advanced civilization dating back any further than tens of thousands of years? And the real reason is this. The demiurge, along with his helpers, which are termed Archons, created the modern day prototype of man and beast within a controlled system called a matrix. There are basically two types of simulations. You have an evolved one and you have a programmed one. This matrix is actually a combination of both. And let me explain what I mean when I say you have a programmed simulation and a matrix simulation, okay? In an evolved simulation or a system, certain laws and conditions are set up in the beginning, and after that, things are basically allowed to happen, or they take place naturally without any outside or external intervention. This is a reality. Many species go extinct every year. And what you're seeing in that specific instance is things occurring that are a part of the larger evolved simulation, okay? Now, in a programmed simulation, intervention must take place at every step of the way. This also happens, but on a micro level, okay? So, in relation to this matrix as a collective, you have what's an evolved simulation, which is the greater simulation. And then within this evolved simulation, you have various programming that take place that would comprise the programmed aspect of the simulation, okay, in which intervention must take place, like I said, at every step of the way. This also happens, but like I said, on a micro level. Now, your evidence of this would be things like HARP, GMOs, engineering and programming that really targets select pockets of society in order to really change or modify the genetics of something. Okay, now let me say that there have been times in which the matrix was reset once the consciousness of the indigenous people reached a certain level. You see it in the Bible when it speaks of the Tower of Babel. You see it in Atlantis, in the flooding of Atlantis, etc. Okay. Now, let me explain this, because it may very well be the first time you've heard this. The universe as we know it had a beginning, and it will have an end. The modern day prototype of man has a beginning and thus has an end. Okay? However, man, capital M, is essentially an anthropomorphic way of labeling consciousness. Okay? Or labeling a conscious thinker. We use these terms, man, which really doesn't die. It's the real you, if you are the elect. Consciousness has always been observing this plane, because if conscious wasn't observing this plane in some form, there would be no way for this plane to expand. It takes consciousness to expand a jurisdiction. It takes consciousness to expand our dimensions of length, depth, and height. And the conscious experience would be your time element. So your time element comes out of conscious experience, meaning time as we know it exists once consciousness starts to experience or interpret this plane. Okay. For example, in law, right? The citizens must be conscious of breaking laws in order for the courts to expand their jurisdiction. This is why cops will ask you, do you understand your rights? Do you understand the charges against you, etc.? They're also asking you, or they also ask you this because they need the citizen to stand under the codes and statutes and public policy, because this is what gives them validity, okay? It's what gives them validity. Now, in the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ by Levi Dowling, in chapter 32, verse 18 and 19, it says that time never was when man was not. That which begins will have an end. If man was not, the time will come when he will not exist. Furthermore, like I stated earlier in the Circle 7 Quran, in chapter 1, under the creation and fall of man, that time never was in which man was not. Okay, basically saying the same thing, meaning man, or the thinker / observer, which denotes the collective, including females, as split consciousness out of one androgynous prototype, have always been, because remember, the physical vehicle is a governor for consciousness. The physical vehicle is a governor for consciousness. It limits consciousness. It limits expression and interpretation of data. Okay? So, as consciousness started to expand within this plane, the potential for interaction really grew. Okay, and the architects of this system, which I call the Archons, are the ones who entombed consciousness within dense physical bodies with brains to essentially limit expression and interpretation. Now, the Archons are our Satan. They are the adversaries that use the physical body along with other life forms as containers in order to store and extract energy. This is important. Now, we as rays of divine consciousness work towards liberation, which is positive elevation. However, for the Archons, their evolution is contingent upon the amount of energy that's harvested from us so that they can continue their process of evolution, because they also reside within a closed system. It's like gears in a car, for example, okay? One gear rotates one way, but another gear might rotate in a reverse direction. And that reverse direction is its natural function, okay? So, consequently, because of this, we are held captive. Now, in the Bible, specifically Genesis chapter 1, it talks about consecutive ages referred to as days, okay? This is how, I believe the Hebrew word is yom. This is how this matrix came to be in a roundabout way, okay? So it's similar to, you have Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, 8, etc., all of which are really designed to run increasingly complex coding in different hardware setups, okay? So with each consecutive matrix simulation, life evolved and was also programmed into this system because the Archons were also undergoing evolution. They're not all knowing and perfect. They fuck up all the time. If you look around enough, you'll eventually see glitches in the matrix. So when you look at dinosaurs and large mammals, these were just experimental designs which were also used as large storehouses for energy. Now, the brain, if you look at the brain of many of these larger dinosaurs, it was noticeably smaller in size, which kept them in lockdown and limited their expression and interpretation of data, all right? And as the Earth started to evolve, dinosaurs and earlier life forms couldn't compensate. Now, some can speculate as to why they went extinct, be it an extinction level event like an asteroid collision, famine, etc. But the purpose of dinosaurs was really threefold. They were used as energy receptacles for the Archons. They seeded the earth with what we now call fossil fuels. And lastly, they were early designs that the Archons could build off of to make more advanced species, okay? And by the way, there were many earlier prototypes of man. Now, when you look at consciousness, it must be properly understood that there's a difference between the body and the one interpreting reality, which is the thinker. And many of you listening already know that. And also that consciousness is never really created. It just transmigrates, okay? However, there are varying levels of consciousness ranging from elemental to highly complex modes of consciousness. Higher modes of consciousness on this planet, us, the ones that are actually listening to this entry and understanding it, we're among the higher order, which directly equates to experience, okay? Whether that be consciously or unconsciously. No, now, let me explain what I just said. Higher modes of consciousness are higher because they have more experience, okay? Experience equates to higher modes of consciousness, all right? It's your brain that compels you to forget and nothing else, okay? The brain has certain filters that filter out experiences. For example, like when you dream and then wake up, you often forget what you were dreaming about because your brain is a filter which filters out experiences that you can use for your evolution. This is why knowledge is fractured. Knowledge is fractured because of the brain, which is the reason why confusion exists, as well as persistent genetic modification by the Archons through their agents that run this world, which directly serve and worship the Archons, which that would be your micro-programming sector of the Matrix. Now, this brings me to the caucasoid, okay? The caucasoid is an animal, literally. He is the chief creation of the Archons. The Genesis creation story is the story of his creation in a roundabout way. See, what happened was this. We as the indigenous people were created first. However, because we were we were seeded with divine light. And you can read about the story of the sons of God coming down and taking the daughters of men to procreate with in the Bible in Genesis chapter 6. That's our story, okay? We are the offspring. We are the hybrids, the Canaanites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, the Moors, etc. Remember, don't get caught up in names, because names are just classifications and designations of a people group, okay? So essentially, we were created first, but because we had that divine spark within us, we were actually born again, quote unquote, okay? So essentially we were created first, like I said, but we had that divine spark within us due to what happened in Genesis chapter 6. That spark is that which the righteous gods gave us. Okay, that's why in the Bible it says all of Israel shall be saved, because all of Israel has that divine spark within them. Now, that divine spark that we were given by the gods who came down and procreated with the daughters of men, it actually made us superior to the Archons. But since we were down here, we were ultimately held captive to or by the Archons, who were essentially jealous. They're essentially jealous. Even the Bible says that the God of the Old Testament is a jealous God, and he's not jealous over anyone else but Israel. He doesn't tell anyone else about the jealous issue but Israel. He says he's jealous over and because of Israel, constantly, habitually. It says this in Scripture. Now, I mean, and when you look at the Bible, there's truth in the Bible. You just have to know how to decode it. You just have to know how to decode it. And the church will not help you do that. Now, the initial idea for the caucasoid was that of the Archons, in hopes of limiting conscious expansion and keeping the Nephilim, which are us, in subjection to the Archons through law, statutes, and commandments. Now, Yaqub, who the Nation of Islam frequently talks about, he was a melanated man who was one of the scientists who had to be possessed in order to carry out the genetic modification needed to create the caucasoid prototype. See, and you couldn't even compare Einstein nor Nikola Tesla to Yaqub, because he was light years beyond them. Even then, he was said to have the knowledge of the gods. Since the caucasoid was entrusted with the duty of limiting conscious expression, being the Antichrist. Anti meaning against, Christ meaning oil, or aka melanin, black gold, Texas tea. So they're basically against the expression of the so-called black man. So he is therefore a Satan to our people, and he is this way by nature. Remember that. He is this way by nature, and a leopard cannot change its spots. That's another quote from the Bible. It's in his genetics to want to obsess over and exploit our people. The evolution of consciousness begins and ends with us. See, what's happening now is that he has to monitor us at every corner in order to not only maintain the suppression, but to create new ways to suppress us because of our constant evolution, which the melanin is a big contributor to. Okay. However, since laws can and do change, and due to things like the 14th Amendment, civil rights, affirmative action, your average caucasoid is also a victim now too. And this is where it gets interesting. And the anger that you see in people like Alex Jones, the Tea Party, etc., lashing out against their fellow brethren, they're doing this because they're mad. And they're mad because their nature tells them on an unconscious level that they're not supposed to be the threat. We are. The melanated ones are the threat. So to them, all the surveillance of Johnny and Becky seem unnecessary. But nobody says shit. Nobody says shit when all that surveillance is in our neighborhood, though. I mean, and furthermore, like where I live, okay, I live in a predominantly Caucasian area, okay? And I can tell you from firsthand experience that these white boys are tearing shit up. I mean, stealing left and right. I mean, drugs, pills. They're going crazy out here, but at the same time they make it seem like it's our people that are the problem. It's our people that are the thugs. When personally I have firsthand experience that that's not the case, and it never was the case, because they're animals by nature. So you can see the tendencies just when you see things happen. It's just the expression of natural tendencies. Okay. So, but you can't discriminate anymore, right? So the caucasoid is now included in the suppression of consciousness. So, and ultimately the Archons don't really give a shit either about the caucasoid, because they're willing to reward them for doing an effective job, because if they can do an effective job in the suppression of consciousness of us, then this matrix can stay open, which is a prison that we are incarcerated in, serving perpetual life sentences for disobedience. That disobedience is basically going against the gods, the Archons. Ignorance is obedience. Knowledge is sin. So consequently, we are in hell as the elect. The masses are in heaven because ignorance is bliss. Now, you can read about the fall and what happened thereof in the Bible in Genesis chapter 2 and 3. One of the most published books in the world. So, indeed, yes, we are in hell, in which knowing is half the battle. So, yeah, we are in hell, but evolution is cyclical. It's not simply one directional, because the only way that one can go once one reaches perfection is downward into chaos. And this is what the majority or the masses don't understand. And yeah, this is what they don't understand. So basically, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And just look at John chapter 10 verse 36. We must know, we must come to a realization of who we are, and not just that, but make a diligent and concerted effort to really make progress, And the only thing stopping us, who are the elect, from completely controlling this thing is the body and the limitations of our own mind. So with that being said, I would just like to say once again that I am Brother Prodigy. Today's date is March the 5th, 2014. Peace and Hotep.